The thing I am most known for would be for my work in strategic storytelling, particularly in business. That's been the focus of my research for over 25 years. Yes, it's been that long. It's what I teach at events and workshops. I wrote a best-selling book about storytelling in business, and I love what stories and business can do together. In fact, I was planning to write another book about it, focus more specifically on leaders in storytelling. And then one day, a few years ago, everything changed. I was at an event. It was mostly women, entrepreneurs, a lot of mothers, and I was feeling especially stressed, joyless, unhappy. Work was great. I was busier than ever, and that was the problem. My work, which, as I said, I love, was keeping me from my other love, which is my children and my family, and it was an all-out brawl with my inner voice. Every work success was tainted with a sense that I was failing as a mother. It made me worse at my job at the very least, it was siphoning off any joy I felt. Now, I remember at this event, I had finally had it. I was on stage in front of a group I knew could relate, and I shared that all day there were stories playing and replaying in my head of what a failure I was as a mother, the pickups I missed, the fact that I didn't know to bring a sugar pumpkin instead of a big pumpkin to pumpkin decorating day. The stories went on, and then I stopped and said, but you know what? There are good stories too. I said it out loud, but I was saying it to myself. The stories of when I was absolutely the best mother for my two children. And in fact, there's one story in particular. It was about my daughter. She was about 3 years old at the time, and we were in her bedroom, very pink, on the floor, building something with blocks. It wasn't exactly clear what we were building, but then my daughter looked at me and she said, "Mama, we are building a castle." Okay, there were some architectural issues with the castle. We could fix that. And then she looked at me and said, "And we live in this castle, Mama. We do. Because we are two princesses," which, I mean, to be seen as a princess by your daughter is a pretty special thing. Princesses are very important at that point in their lives. And then she looked at me again, and her eyes narrowed, and she said, "And it's a big castle, Mama, because we are two princesses who go to work." And in that moment, it hit me that maybe the fact that I'm pursuing my dream is allowing her to dream bigger. And that is something, as a mother, I am very okay with. And that is just one of the many, many stories of what a great mother I am. So why on earth do I allow all of these negative stories to be my default? Why not the ones that fuel me, that make me feel alive and proud and good and right? I asked this question aloud to the audience, and afterwards, I remember the response was different. I mean, yes, they appreciated the strategies and insights that I shared about using stories in their professional life, but in a world where professional success and personal success cannot be separated, it seemed very clear to me that something happened there. That while I had talked about in my book, in my research, the 4 key stories that every person in business needs to be able to tell, maybe there was a 5th one. And that was the story we tell ourselves. Now, I told that story on a whim one day, and a few days later, I had another keynote presentation, a similar audience, and so I decided to share it again. Maybe it was a fluke, but it wasn't. And I tested that story again and again, and finally it met the ultimate test. an audience that was 98% middle-aged male. But I decided to share that story anyway. And I almost missed my flight home. Because as I worked my way from backstage out through the ballroom into the hallway to catch the car, I was stopped over and over and over again by middle-aged men with tears in the corner of their eye, wanting to tell me the stories of their daughters or their wives or the women that are important in their life or their own struggles with toggling between their ambition as a professional and their love for their family. And I knew that it was true. That while storytelling is extremely important, especially in business, there is no story more important than the story we tell ourselves. Every day, we are telling ourselves stories. It happens automatically. There's no way around it. Without us even realizing it, these stories are there. And because we are programmed with a natural negativity bias, they're not often stories that are designed to lift us up and forward, but rather stories that are designed to hold us in place and keep us safe. However, the good stories are there. The stories that serve us, that make us, as I said, feel alive, that move us forward. And if my new research indicates anything, it's that consciously choosing the good stories can increase optimism and hopefulness, decrease our fear of failure, decrease that subtle sense of anxiety that is now seems to be a built-in feature of human existence. And most importantly, increase the overall satisfaction with the life we already have. Now, I'll admit this is not the path I expected my storytelling work to take, but hey, sometimes the best stories happen on the roads we didn't intend to travel. So if you have had this sense that something is holding you back or stealing your joy and you can't quite put your finger on it, there's a good chance it's the stories you're telling yourself. And it might be time to start choosing better ones. And I can't wait to hear what happens when you do.